The broken glass crunched under my boots like crushed diamonds, each shard catching the amber glow of streetlights filtering through the bar's entrance. My vision blurred at the edges, the metallic taste of blood coating my tongue as I stumbled past the shattered window I'd just destroyed. Dante's Nightcap, the most exclusive establishment in Chicago's South Loop, stood silent around me, all polished mahogany and leather booths that probably cost more than my entire year's rent. I shouldn't be here. I knew that with the same certainty I knew my ribs were cracked, maybe broken. But Marcus and his crew were still hunting the streets outside, and this was the only building on the block with lights still burning in the back office at 3 a.m. My left eye was swelling shut, my knuckles split open from the fight I'd barely survived, and blood dripped steadily from a gash above my eyebrow onto the pristine hardwood floors. You have exactly 5 seconds to explain why you just destroyed a $15,000 imported Italian window before I put a bullet between your eyes. The voice came from the shadows near the bar, smooth as aged whiskey and twice as dangerous. I spun toward it, my fists coming up instinctively despite the screaming pain in my ribs. That's when he stepped into the light, and my breath caught despite everything. Dante Ravencroft. Every bartender, bouncer, and cocktail waitress in Chicago knew that name, whispered it with equal parts reverence and terror. He owned 37 establishments across the city, from dive bars to penthouse lounges, and rumor said he owned pieces of men's souls, too. I'd served drinks at 3 different places before landing at Murphy's Pub in Pilsen, and every single owner had the same warning. Never cross Dante Ravencroft, never owe Dante Ravencroft, and for God's sake, never, ever steal from Dante Ravencroft. He was taller than I expected, maybe 6'3", with shoulders that strained against his white dress shirt. The top 3 buttons were undone, revealing a glimpse of olive skin and the edge of what looked like a tattoo. His sleeves were rolled to his elbows, exposing powerful forearms marked with more ink. Dark hair fell slightly over his forehead, and his eyes... God. His eyes were the color of espresso, deep and unreadable as they swept over me with predatory focus. Those eyes narrowed when they landed on my face, and something flickered across his expression too quickly for me to name. I asked you a question, he said, but his tone had shifted, gone from lethal to something else entirely. He moved around the bar with fluid grace, and I noticed the gun tucked into the waistband at the small of his back, the Rolex on his wrist catching the light. Who hurt your face? Not why are you here or how dare you break into my establishment? Who hurt your face? The question hit me harder than Marcus's right hook had an hour ago. I'm sorry about the window, I managed, tasting fresh blood as I spoke. I'll pay for it. I just needed somewhere to... The room tilted, and I grabbed for the nearest booth to steady myself. I needed to hide. Dante closed the distance between us in 3 strides, catching my elbow before I could collapse. His touch was surprisingly gentle, completely at odds with the lethal weapon I knew he carried. Up close, I could smell his cologne, something expensive and woodsy that made me want to lean into him despite every survival instinct screaming that this man was dangerous. Sit, he commanded, guiding me onto a leather bar stool. Don't move. He disappeared into the back, and I considered running. I should run, but my legs were shaking, adrenaline finally crashing now that I'd stopped moving, and honestly, where would I go? Marcus knew every underground gym, every back alley fighting ring in the city. He'd been my trainer for 3 years, taught me every combination I knew, and now he wanted me dead because I'd stolen from him. Except I hadn't really stolen. I'd borrowed, skimmed from the betting pools over 6 months, carefully, precisely, just enough to keep my mother's treatment going when her insurance denied coverage for the experimental therapy that was actually working. I'd planned to pay it back, had already started returning money from my last 5 wins. But someone had talked, or Marcus had finally bothered to check his books. And tonight he'd cornered me in the locker room at Sal's gym with 3 of his muscle-bound associates. I'd fought my way out. Years of training and desperation make a powerful combination. but not before taking serious damage. Split lip, black eye forming, the gash above my eyebrow that wouldn't stop bleeding, and ribs that made every breath feel like inhaling broken glass. I'd run through 6 blocks of South Loop, Chicago at 3 a.m, Marcus and his boys howling for my blood like wolves on the hunt. Dante returned with a first aid kit that looked far too comprehensive for a simple bar, setting it on the counter beside me with a bottle of expensive whiskey. He poured 2 fingers into a crystal tumbler and held it out. "Drink. It'll help with the pain." I took the glass, our fingers brushing, and knocked back the whiskey in one swallow. It burned down my throat, warmth spreading through my chest, temporarily overriding the ache in my ribs. Dante watched me with those intense dark eyes, then picked up a clean bar towel and poured whiskey directly onto it. "This is going to hurt," he said, moving to stand directly in front of me, between my knees. "But that cut needs to be cleaned before infection sets in." He pressed the alcohol-soaked towel to my eyebrow, and I hissed through my teeth, fingers gripping the edge of the bar. Dante's other hand came up to cup the side of my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone, holding me steady with surprising tenderness. "Who hurt your face?" Each word was precisely enunciated, and I realized he was furious. Not at me, at whoever had done this to me. "Why do you care?" I asked, meeting his gaze. "You don't even know me. I just broke your window and bled all over your expensive floors." "I know you're Sailor Thorne," he said, dabbing carefully at the gash. 28 years old, bartender at Murphy's in Pilsen, though Connor tells me you gave notice last week. You're a fighter, underground circuit, decent record, maybe 30 wins in 3 years. You're left-handed but can throw a mean right hook when necessary, and you've been skimming money from Marcus Donovan's betting pools to pay for your mother's cancer treatment at Northwestern Memorial. The blood drained from my face. He knew. This man knew everything, and I was sitting in his bar at 3 a.m. with nowhere to run. "If you know all that," I whispered, "then you know I'm dead the moment I step outside. Marcus doesn't forgive, and he doesn't forget. He thinks I stole 50 grand from him." "Did you?" "I borrowed $37,460. The exact number I'd been tracking in a notebook hidden under my mattress, planning to repay every cent. My mother's alive because of that money. Her cancer's in remission. So yeah, I took it, and I'd do it again. Dante studied my face for a long moment, then reached for a butterfly bandage, carefully closing the cut above my eyebrow. His touch remained gentle, precise, the hands of a man who knew how to be deliberate with violence, but was choosing care instead. "Marcus Donovan is a small-time operator with delusions of grandeur," Dante said, his voice dropping to something dark and promising. "He runs one underground gym and thinks that makes him somebody. He puts his hands on women who can't fight back and calls himself a businessman." "I can fight back," I said, probably unwisely given my current state. "I got away, didn't I?" A ghost of a smile touched Dante's lips, there and gone in an instant. "Yes, you did. And in the process, you broke into my establishment, destroyed an expensive window, and bled all over my floor. That means you owe me, Sailor Thorne." My heart kicked against my bruised ribs. Owing money to Marcus had gotten me into this mess. I couldn't imagine what owing a man like Dante Ravencroft would cost. "I don't have anything left to give. Everything I have went to my mother's treatment." "I'm not interested in your money." He finished with the butterfly bandage and moved to examine my split knuckles, turning my hands over with surprising gentleness. "These need cleaning too. You're going to have scarring." "I have plenty of scars already." I noticed. His thumb traced over old marks on my knuckles, evidence of 100 fights, 1,000 hours in the ring. "Tell me something. Would you rather owe me or owe Marcus?" The question hung in the air between us, heavy with implications I was too exhausted and in too much pain to fully process. Outside, I heard voices, men calling out, searching. Marcus and his crew still hunting. Dante heard them too, His jaw tightened, and when he looked at me again, there was something predatory in his expression, something that made me understand exactly why people whispered his name with fear. "Stay here," he commanded. "Behind the bar, on the floor, and do not make a sound no matter what you hear." "Understood." I slid off the bar stool and crouched behind the polished mahogany as Dante strode toward the broken window. He moved with the confidence of a man who'd never questioned his own power, who'd never had to. I watched through the gaps in the bar shelving as he stepped into the doorway, silhouetted against the streetlights. "Gentlemen?" His voice carried clearly in the night air, smooth and dangerous. "I believe you're looking for something that belongs to me now. I suggest you keep walking. That bitch came in here." Marcus's voice, rough from years of cigarettes and shouting. "We tracked her blood. Hand her over and we'll be on our way." "The only thing I'm going to hand you," Dante said, and I heard the unmistakable sound of a gun being cocked, "is a warning. You have 10 seconds to disappear from my street before I make you disappear permanently. After that, I'm calling in favors, and by tomorrow morning, every underground gym in Chicago will know you put your hands on a woman and called it business." Silence. Then footsteps, retreating, and Marcus's voice carrying back. "You're making a mistake, Ravencroft. She stole from me." 9, Dante counted, cold and final. 8, 7. The footsteps quickened, fading into the distance. Dante stood in the doorway for another full minute, before finally holstering his weapon and turning back into the bar. He found me still crouched behind the counter, my entire body shaking now that the adrenaline had fully worn off. "Come out," he said gently. "They're gone. They won't be back." I stood on unsteady legs, gripping the bar for support. "Why did you do that? You don't know me. You said yourself I owe you now." Dante crossed back to me, and this time when he touched my face, fingers trailing along my jaw, tilting my chin up so I had to meet his eyes, the gentleness was edged with something possessive. "Someone hurt what's mine," he said softly, dangerously. "That's not something I tolerate. Ever." "I'm not yours," I whispered, even as my body swayed toward him, seeking the safety he offered, despite knowing he was probably the most dangerous man in the room. "Not yet," he agreed, and his thumb brushed across my split lower lip with devastating tenderness. "But you will be, Sailor Thorne. By the time I'm done protecting you, by the time I'm done hunting down every man who thought he could touch you, you'll understand exactly what it means to belong to Dante Ravencroft." His words should have terrified me. Instead, as I stood there bleeding and broken in his bar at 3 a.m, with his hands cradling my face like I was something precious rather than a fighter who'd just destroyed his property, all I felt was relief. Maybe safety, I thought, comes in unexpected packages. Dante led me through his bar to the back office, his hand at the small of my back, warm through my blood-stained tank top. The office was exactly what I'd expected. Leather furniture, dark wood, walls lined with expensive bottles I couldn't name, and a massive desk covered in neat stacks of cash. He'd been counting money at 3 a.m, I realized. That's why the lights had been on. "Sit." He gestured to the leather couch, then locked the office door behind us. "I need to check your ribs." "I'm fine," I protested, but even I could hear how weak the lie was. Every breath felt like someone was stabbing me with hot knives. Dante raised an eyebrow, crossed to a cabinet, and pulled out a medical bag that looked like it belonged in an emergency room. I've been around enough fights to know the difference between fine and cracked ribs. Shirt up or off. Your choice. My face heated despite everything. This is already the most bizarre night of my life. The last thing I need is... If you were a man who'd broken into my bar bleeding, I'd be checking your injuries the same way, Dante said matter-of-factly. I don't let people die on my property. It's bad for business. Now, shirt. I peeled off my tank top with shaking hands, wincing as the movement pulled at my injured ribs. I was wearing a sports bra underneath, at least. But I'd never felt more exposed than I did sitting in Dante Ravencroft's office, half naked and vulnerable, while he looked at me with clinical focus. He knelt in front of me, hands hovering just above my skin. I'm going to press gently on each rib. Tell me if the pain gets sharp. His fingers were warm and surprisingly gentle as they probed along my ribcage. I bit down hard on my lip to keep from crying out when he hit the damaged area on my left side. Cracked, possibly broken, he confirmed, reaching for an elastic bandage. I'll wrap them, but you need x-rays. There's a doctor I know, works at Northwestern, owes me several favors. I'll have him meet us at his private practice in an hour. I can't afford a doctor, I said quietly. All my money went to my mother's treatment. Dante's hands paused in their wrapping, and when he looked up at me, something fierce burned in his dark eyes. Did you hear me mention money? I said he owes me. That means this costs you nothing except accepting my help. Why are you helping me? The question burst out before I could stop it. You could have let Marcus take me. You could have called the cops and had me arrested for breaking your window. Instead, you're wrapping my ribs and offering to take me to a doctor. I don't understand. Dante finished securing the bandage, his hands lingering on my skin, just a moment longer than necessary. When I was 16, my sister Lucia broke into a restaurant kitchen at 2 a.m. She was running from her boyfriend, who'd decided hitting women made him a man. The chef found her bleeding and scared, and instead of calling the police, he hid her in the walk-in freezer and called my father. He stood, grabbing a clean shirt from a closet and handing it to me. It was one of his, massive on my frame, but it smelled like his cologne and was infinitely cleaner than my blood-soaked tank top. My father made that boyfriend disappear, Dante continued, his voice dropping to something cold and final. And he taught me that there are lines you don't cross. Hitting women is one of them. Letting a woman bleed out because you're too concerned with money or reputation is another. You remind me of Lucia. Same fire, same desperation, same willingness to break windows and face the consequences rather than let some bastard break you. I pulled his shirt on, the soft fabric swallowing me. What happened to your sister? She runs my books now. Married a stockbroker, has 3 kids, and could make a grown man cry with her accounting skills. A genuine smile touched his lips, transforming his face from dangerous to devastating. She's safe because someone helped her when she needed it most. Now I'm helping you. You said I owe you, I reminded him, pulling my damp hair out of his shirt collar. Nothing comes free, especially not from men like you. Men like me. Dante moved to his desk, leaning against it with his arms crossed. In the low light of the office, he looked every inch the mafia boss people whispered about. Powerful, dangerous, completely in control. What do you think you know about men like me, sailor? I know you own half the bars in Chicago. I know people are terrified of you. I know you probably have connections that could make someone like me disappear without a trace. I met his gaze steadily despite the fear curling in my stomach. And I know men with power always want something in return. Smart girl. He pushed off the desk, moving toward me with predatory grace. Yes, I want something. I want to know every detail about Marcus Donovan's operation. Every fighter he manages, every underground ring he runs, every dirty cop he pays off, and every cent he's skimmed from other people's hard work. I want to know everyone who was in that locker room tonight, everyone who laid hands on you, everyone who helped him hunt you through my streets. His eyes were black fire as he stopped directly in front of me. And then I want you to watch while I take everything from him. His gyms, his rings, his reputation, his pride. I'm going to make sure Marcus Donovan never forgets the night he touched what belongs to me. I don't belong to you, I said, but my voice came out breathless. Not yet. He repeated his earlier words, and his hand came up to cup my face, thumb tracing my cheekbone with devastating gentleness. But you broke into my bar, Sailor Thorne. You chose my window, my sanctuary, my protection. Whether you meant to or not, you put yourself in my world, and I don't let go of things that are mine. I should have pulled away. Everything about Dante Ravencroft screamed danger, from his tailored clothes to his easy violence, to the possessive way he touched me like he had every right. But I'd spent 3 years fighting in underground rings, 3 years watching men bet on whether I'd survive to the next round, 3 years dealing with trainers like Marcus who saw me as nothing but a commodity. Dante saw me as something worth protecting, worth avenging, worth keeping. Tell me about Marcus, he said, his voice dropping to something almost gentle. Start from the beginning. So I did. I told him how I'd started fighting at 25, desperate for money after my mother's diagnosis. How Marcus had found me winning bar fights in Pilsen and offered to train me properly. How he'd been decent at first, professional, until I started winning regularly and the betting money rolled in. How he'd taken 60% of my winnings, saying it was standard, and how I'd been too desperate to argue. I told Dante about discovering the discrepancies in Marcus's books 6 months ago, realizing he was skimming from multiple fighters and pocketing the difference. About how I'd started my own skimming operation, carefully extracting money from the betting pools to pay for my mother's experimental treatment. I kept perfect records, I said, pulling out my phone and showing him the spreadsheet I'd maintained. Every cent I took, every payment I made to the hospital, every fight where I adjusted the numbers. I planned to pay it all back once my mother was in remission and I could focus on winning bigger fights. Dante studied the spreadsheet with the focus of a man who understood money and power. This is good. Detailed. You've got transaction dates, ring locations, even the names of the bookies handling bets. Marcus is sloppy. He probably didn't realize you were documenting everything. I'm a bartender, I said with a shrug that made my ribs scream. We pay attention to details. Plus, I figured if he ever caught me, I'd need proof that I was only taking what he'd already stolen from others. You weren't wrong. Dante scrolled through my records, his expression growing darker with each entry. Marcus has been running scams in 3 different gyms, stealing from fighters who trust him. This is enough to blacklist him from every underground circuit in the Midwest. He looked up at me, and something like admiration flickered in his eyes. You're smarter than he gave you credit for. Braver, too. Most people would have run the moment they realized Marcus was dirty. Most people don't have mothers dying of cancer, I said quietly. I would have done anything to keep her alive, even if it meant stealing from a thief. Dante set my phone aside and moved closer, his hands settling on either side of me on the couch, caging me in without actually touching. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stay here tonight, sleep on my couch, and in the morning, we're going to see my doctor friend. He'll check your ribs, make sure nothing's seriously damaged, and give you something for the pain. And then? I asked, hyper-aware of how close he was, how his body heat seemed to wrap around me like a blanket. Then you're going to move into the apartment above this bar. It's empty, fully furnished, and about 10 times safer than whatever place you're living in now. You're going to work for me, bartending here during the day, helping me understand the underground fighting circuit at night. I can't just move in with you, I protested. People will talk. They'll think I'm... What? My mistress? My employee? My investment? Dante's smile was sharp and dangerous. Let them think whatever they want. The only thing that matters is that Marcus and his crew will never touch you again, because everyone in Chicago will know you're under my protection. And what do you get out of this arrangement? I asked, trying to ignore the flutter in my stomach at the way he looked at me. Dante's hand came up, fingers tangling in my hair, tilting my head back so I had to meet his eyes. I get to watch you heal. I get to train you properly, teach you how to fight without getting yourself killed. I get information about Marcus's entire operation, and I get the satisfaction of destroying a man who thinks he can hurt women in my city. His thumb brushed my lower lip, and I felt the touch everywhere. And eventually, when you're ready, when you understand that I'm nothing like the men who've hurt you, I get you. Completely. No more running, no more fighting alone, no more choosing between your safety and your mother's health. You'll belong to me, Sailor, and I'll make sure the entire city knows what happens to people who touch what's mine. That's insane, I whispered. You don't even know me. I know enough. I know you'd rather break windows than break your word. I know you'd fight your way through 3 grown men rather than give up. I know you love your mother enough to risk everything. That's enough for me. He leaned in, and for a heart-stopping moment, I thought he might kiss me. Instead, his lips brushed my forehead, tender and claiming all at once. Get some rest, he murmured against my skin. Tomorrow we start taking apart Marcus Donovan's world piece by piece. And Sailor, the men who hurt you tonight, they're going to wish they'd never touched you. I promise you that. He pulled back, leaving me feeling cold without his warmth, and moved to his desk. He grabbed a blanket from the closet and draped it over me with surprising care. Sleep. I'll be here all night, working. You're safe. I shouldn't have believed him. I shouldn't have trusted a mafia boss who'd known me for less than 2 hours. But as I curled up on his leather couch, wrapped in his blanket and his shirt, listening to the sound of him working at his desk, I felt safer than I had in 3 years. Maybe Dante Ravencroft was dangerous. Maybe he was possessive and controlling, and exactly the kind of man I should run from. But he'd looked at my broken face and asked who hurt me. He'd wrapped my ribs with gentle hands and offered me protection without asking for anything I wasn't willing to give. For the first time since my mother's diagnosis, I wasn't alone in the fight. And that was worth whatever price Dante would eventually demand. I fell asleep to the sound of him counting money and making phone calls, his voice a low rumble, promising violence to anyone who dared threaten what was his. Tomorrow, I'd worry about what I'd gotten myself into. Tonight, I just let myself rest. 3 days later, I stood in the apartment above Dante's nightcap, staring at the space that had somehow become mine. The doctor had confirmed 2 cracked ribs, but nothing more serious, wrapped me properly, and given me industrial-strength painkillers that actually worked. Dante had hired movers to collect my belongings from my studio apartment in Pilsen, all of which fit into 6 boxes, and had them delivered before I could protest. The apartment itself was stunning. Exposed brick walls, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking South Loop, a kitchen with appliances I'd only seen in magazines, and a bedroom larger than my entire previous living space. It felt like something from a different life, one where I wasn't counting pennies and fighting in basement rings for grocery money. The locks are biometric, Dante explained, demonstrating the security system on the front door. Your fingerprint, plus a code only you and I know. The windows are bulletproof, and there's a panic button in every room that connects directly to my phone. Bulletproof windows, I repeated, trying to process the level of security he'd installed. That seems excessive for a bartender. Dante turned to face me, and in the afternoon light streaming through those bulletproof windows, I could see him clearly. The sharp line of his jaw, the faint scar above his left eyebrow, the way his dress shirt pulled across his shoulders. He'd rolled his sleeves up, revealing the full extent of the tattoos on his forearms. Italian words I couldn't quite read, mixed with images of ravens and roses. You're not just a bartender anymore, Sailor. You're someone Marcus Donovan wants dead, which means you need protection. And you're someone working for me, which means your safety reflects on my reputation. He moved closer, and I caught that woodsy cologne again. Besides, I prefer my investments intact. Is that what I am? An investment. You're whatever you need to be to accept my help. His hand came up, fingers trailing down my arm, and I tried to ignore the goosebumps that followed his touch. Fighter, bartender, investment. Mine. The possessiveness in that last word should have bothered me. Instead, I found myself leaning into it, into him, drawn by something I couldn't quite name. Dante, I started, but he shook his head. I have a meeting in an hour. Get settled, take your pain medication, and rest those ribs. Tomorrow night we start your real training. What real training? His smile was sharp and dangerous. If you're going to work for me, you need to know how to fight properly, not just street brawling and underground ring tactics. I'm going to teach you how to survive in my world. He left before I could respond, and I spent the rest of the day unpacking my meager belongings and trying not to think about what surviving in his world might entail. The next night, Dante led me down to a private gym in the basement of his building. It was easily 3 times the size of any underground facility I'd trained in, with professional equipment, pristine floors, and lighting that actually worked. No blood-stained mats or broken equipment here. Show me what Marcus taught you, Dante said, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. He'd changed into athletic wear, black pants and a fitted shirt that showed every line of muscle, and looked every inch the predator I knew him to be. I moved to the heavy bag and started running through combinations. Jab, cross, hook, uppercut. The movements were fluid despite my wrapped ribs, muscle memory taking over. I'd spent 3 years perfecting these combinations, learning to hit hard and fast and survive. Dante watched silently for 10 minutes before pushing off the wall. Stop. I turned, breathing hard. What's wrong? Everything. He moved into the ring with me, circling like he was assessing prey. Your stance is too wide, leaves you vulnerable to leg sweeps. Your guard drops after the 3rd punch in any combination. You telegraph your right hook by dropping your shoulder. And you're favoring your uninjured side so heavily that anyone paying attention would know exactly where to hit to take you down. Heat flushed my cheeks. I've won 30 fights with that technique. Against other amateurs in underground rings where the biggest prize is $3,000 in bragging rights. Dante moved behind me, his hands settling on my hips, adjusting my stance. I'm teaching you to fight against professionals, against people who fight for keeps, not for show. His touch was electric, even through my clothes. I tried to focus on his instruction rather than the heat of his body behind mine. Feet closer together, he murmured, his breath warm against my ear. Power comes from your core, not from having a wide base. You're a woman fighting against men twice your size. You can't rely on strength. You need speed, precision, and the element of surprise. He moved my arms, adjusting my guard. Higher. Protect your face at all times. Marcus taught you to brawl, but I'm teaching you to win. We spent 2 hours drilling basics, stance, footwork, defensive positioning. Dante was relentless, correcting every mistake, pushing me to move faster despite my injured ribs. By the end, I was drenched in sweat, and my medication was wearing off, pain radiating from my left side. Enough, Dante said, tossing me a towel. You're favoring those ribs too much. We'll continue when you've healed. I'm fine, I protested, even though standing upright felt like torture. Dante raised an eyebrow, then moved with lightning speed, jabbing toward my injured side. I flinched violently, and he caught me before I could fall, his arms wrapping around my waist. You're not fine, he said quietly, and there was something almost tender in his voice. And pushing yourself before you're healed will only make the injury worse. I need you functional, sailor, not broken. You sound like you actually care, I said, meaning it as a joke, but it came out vulnerable. Dante's arms tightened around me, and he leaned down until his forehead nearly touched mine. I told you, I don't let people hurt what's mine. That includes you hurting yourself. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He released me with obvious reluctance and checked the screen, his expression darkening. Problem? I asked. Marcus is hosting a fight tonight at Sal's gym. Big money, lots of spectators. Dante's eyes met mine, something calculating in their depths. How would you like to make an appearance? My stomach dropped. You want me to go back there, after what happened? I want Marcus to see you. I want him to know you're alive, healthy, and under my protection. I want every fighter and bookie in that gym to understand that touching you means answering to me. He moved closer, his hand cupping my face with that devastating gentleness. Unless you're not ready. I won't push you into something you can't handle. The old sailor would have said yes immediately, would have jumped at the chance to prove she wasn't scared. But 3 days of living in Dante's world had taught me something. Sometimes showing strength meant knowing your limits. My ribs are still cracked, I said honestly. If someone starts something, I can't defend myself properly. You won't have to defend yourself. That's what I'm for. His thumb traced my cheekbone, and I found myself leaning into the touch. You just have to stand beside me and look beautiful. I'll handle everything else. I don't do beautiful, I protested. I do functional and practical. Dante's smile was slow and devastating. Trust me, sailor. You do beautiful just fine. 2 hours later, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, barely recognizing myself. Dante had sent up a stylist, a terrifyingly efficient woman named Rosa, who'd transformed me from underground fighter to something else entirely. She dressed me in fitted black pants, heeled boots that added 3 inches to my height, and a deep green silk top that somehow made my eyes look brighter despite the fading bruises. My hair was loose and styled, makeup subtle but effective at covering the worst of my injuries. You look perfect, Rosa declared, like you could kill a man and not break a sweat. That's the goal, I asked weakly. Honey, when you walk into that gym on Dante Ravencroft's arm, every person there needs to understand you're untouchable. This outfit says you're dangerous, protected, and not someone to mess with. Dante was waiting in the apartment's living room when I emerged, and the look on his face made my breath catch. He'd changed into a charcoal suit with a black shirt, no tie, looking every inch the dangerous predator he was. But when his eyes landed on me, something shifted in his expression. Possessive pride mixed with something darker and hungrier. Sailor, he said, my name a rough caress. You're going to make every man in that gym wish they'd never touched you. He offered his arm, and I took it, trying to ignore how right it felt to be anchored to him. We drove to Pilsen in his black Mercedes, the city lights streaming past, and I tried not to think about the last time I'd been at Sal's gym. The underground facility was packed when we arrived, the air thick with sweat and testosterone, and the metallic scent of blood. A fight was already underway in the ring, 2 heavyweights pounding each other while spectators screamed and waved betting slips. The moment we entered, silence rippled through the crowd. Every eye turned to us, to Dante in his expensive suit, and me at his side, clearly alive and clearly under his protection. I spotted Marcus immediately. He stood near the ring, his face going pale when he saw me. His 3 associates, the ones who'd cornered me in the locker room, went rigid, hands moving toward weapons they probably shouldn't have been carrying. Dante's hand settled at the small of my back, warm and reassuring, as he guided me through the crowd. People parted like water around us, no one willing to get between Dante Ravencroft and wherever he was going. We stopped directly in front of Marcus. Up close, I could see the fear in his eyes, could smell the nervous sweat despite the gym's chill. Marcus, Dante said, his voice carrying easily over the noise of the fight. I believe you've met my employee. You're... Marcus's eyes darted between us. She stole from me. She borrowed money you'd already stolen from others. Dante's tone was conversational, almost friendly, but there was steel underneath. I've reviewed her documentation. Very thorough. I'm sure the boxing commission would find it fascinating reading. Marcus's face went from pale to red. You can't threaten me in my own gym. This isn't a threat. Dante smiled, and it was one of the most dangerous expressions I'd ever seen. This is information. As of tonight, every underground ring in Chicago knows that Sailor Thorne is under my protection. If she gets so much as a paper cut, I'm going to assume you're responsible. And Marcus? I don't make people disappear into rivers. I make them wish they could disappear. He turned to the assembled crowd, raising his voice. Anyone here have a problem with Miss Thorne? Anyone want to collect on whatever bounty Marcus might have offered? Now's your chance to speak up. Silence. Absolute. Terrified silence. Good. Dante's hand slid around my waist, pulling me against his side in a gesture that was both protective and claiming. Glad we understand each other. Oh, and Marcus? Consider this your notice. You have 60 days to clear out of every gym you operate in Chicago. After that, your licenses, your permits, your under-the-table agreements, they all become my problem to solve. Permanently. We turned to leave, but Marcus's voice stopped us. You can't do this. I have connections. Dante turned back slowly, and the look on his face made me shiver. You have nothing I can't take away. Remember that. We left Sal's gym with my hand in his, the crowd parting silently around us. I didn't look back, didn't need to see Marcus's face to know we'd won this round. In the car, my hands were shaking, adrenaline and relief and terror all mixed together in my bloodstream. You okay? Dante asked, his hand covering mine. You just threatened to destroy a man's entire operation because of me, I said quietly. I'm not used to people protecting me like that. Get used to it. He brought my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to my bruised knuckles. You're mine now, Sailor. That means your enemies are my enemies. Your fights are my fights. And anyone who thinks they can hurt you is going to learn exactly what that means. His words should have scared me, should have made me run. But as we drove through Chicago's streets with his hand holding mine, all I felt was safe. 2 weeks after the confrontation at Sal's gym, I was working the afternoon shift at Dante's nightcap when the door opened and a woman I'd never seen before walked in. She was striking. Early 30s, designer clothes, a handbag that probably cost more than I used to make in 3 months, and the same dark eyes that Dante had. You must be Sailor, she said, settling onto a bar stool with practiced grace. I'm Lucia, Dante's sister. My hands stilled on the glass I'd been polishing. This was the sister he'd mentioned, the one who'd broken into a restaurant kitchen running from her abusive boyfriend, the one whose experience had shaped how Dante responded to finding me bleeding in his bar. He talks about you, I said, setting down the glass and offering her my hand. It's nice to finally meet you. Lucia's handshake was firm, businesslike. My brother has been unusually distracted lately. I wanted to see the woman responsible for that. She ordered a gin and tonic, and I made it exactly how I would for any customer, pretending my hands weren't shaking. Lucia Ravencroft wasn't just Dante's sister. She was his accountant, his advisor, and from what I'd gathered, one of the few people whose opinion he actually valued. He helped you, Lucia said, after taking a sip. The same way someone helped me once. That's why he brought you here. Gave you protection. I know. I leaned against the bar, meeting her gaze. He told me about what happened to you, about how your experience taught him to never look away when a woman needs help. Did he tell you what happened to the man who hurt me?" I shook my head, and Lucia's smile was sharp. "My father had him beaten so badly he spent 6 months in the hospital. Then, when he got out, they made sure he left Chicago and never came back. Our family doesn't forgive people who hurt women." She traced the rim of her glass thoughtfully. "But Dante isn't our father. He's worse, more controlled, more methodical, and infinitely more dangerous when someone crosses a line he's drawn. So I'm here to ask you something, Sailor Thorne. Do you understand what you've gotten yourself into? Do you understand what it means to be under my brother's protection?" "I'm learning," I said honestly. "Every day, I'm learning more about your brother's world. And what have you learned?" I thought about the past 2 weeks, about training sessions where Dante taught me to fight properly while his hands lingered on my waist just a second too long. About quiet dinners in the apartment above the bar, where we talked about everything except the growing tension between us. About the way he looked at me like I was something precious and dangerous all at once. I've learned that your brother is nothing like Marcus or any other man who's tried to control me. He's possessive, yes. Protective to the point of being overwhelming. But he's never once made me feel like I'm less than I am. He sees me as a fighter, not just someone to protect." Lucia studied me for a long moment, then smiled. "Good answer. Wrong answer. And I would have had to warn you away from my brother. Right answer means I get to be the one to tell you the truth about Dante Ravencroft." She leaned forward, voice dropping. "My brother has never brought a woman into his world before. He's had girlfriends, yes, but they stayed separate from his business, his life, his real self. You're the first woman he's let into his apartment, his bar, his operations. You're the first woman he's trained personally, protected publicly, and claimed in front of his associates." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying my brother is falling for you, probably harder and faster than he's ever fallen for anyone. And when Dante Ravencroft falls, he falls completely. You'll never be rid of him, Sailor. He'll be possessive and demanding, and he'll expect loyalty that borders on obsession. But in return, he'll give you the same. You'll never be alone, never be unsafe, never be unprotected again." My heart was hammering against my healed ribs. That's a lot of pressure. "Yes, it is. That's why I'm here, to make sure you understand what you're signing up for. Because once you're fully his, once you accept everything that means, there's no going back. Dante doesn't do casual. He doesn't do temporary. When he claims something, he keeps it forever." The door to the bar opened, and Dante walked in, stopping short when he saw us together. "Lucia, I didn't know you were stopping by." "I wanted to meet your bartender," Lucia said innocently, finishing her drink. "She makes an excellent gin and tonic. You should give her a raise." She stood, kissed her brother's cheek, then turned to me. "It was lovely meeting you, Sailor. I'm sure we'll see each other again soon. Perhaps at Sunday dinner. Dante never misses Sunday dinner with the family." She left before I could respond, and Dante moved to the bar, his eyes searching my face. "What did she say to you?" "She wanted to make sure I understood what I was getting into with you." I met his gaze steadily. "That you don't do casual or temporary. That when you claim something, you keep it forever." She's not wrong. Dante reached across the bar, his fingers tangling with mine. "I told you the first night, you're mine, Sailor. That hasn't changed. If anything, it's gotten stronger with every day you've been here." "Dante," I started, but he shook his head. "I know this is fast. I know you're still healing, still figuring out if you can trust me. But I need you to understand something." He moved around the bar, backing me against the shelves of expensive liquor. "I've spent 15 years building my empire. I own establishments across Chicago, have connections in every borough, command respect from men twice my age. But none of that prepared me for finding you bleeding in my bar." His hands came up to frame my face. and I could feel the barely restrained intensity in his touch. You walked into my world at 3 a.m, bleeding and defiant and so goddamn brave I couldn't look away. And every day since then, you've proven that you're exactly the kind of woman I never knew I needed. I'm just a fighter who got in over her head, I whispered. No. His thumb traced my lower lip, the gesture achingly tender. You're a woman who would steal from a thief to save her mother, who would fight her way through 3 trained men rather than give up, who would break my window and face my gun rather than let someone break her. That's not just a fighter, sailor. That's someone extraordinary. He leaned in, his forehead touching mine, and I could feel his breath against my lips. Tell me you feel this too. Tell me I'm not alone in this. I should have pulled away. Should have maintained professional distance. Should have remembered that men like Dante Ravencroft were dangerous for women like me. But I was tired of running. Tired of fighting alone. Tired of pretending I didn't feel the electricity between us every time he touched me. You're not alone, I admitted, my hands coming up to rest on his chest. I could feel his heartbeat, rapid and strong under my palms. I don't know what this is or where it's going, but you're not alone. Dante's control snapped. His mouth came down on mine, claiming and possessive and devastatingly perfect. I kissed him back with equal intensity, months of loneliness and fear and desperation pouring into the connection between us. His hands tangled in my hair, angling my head to deepen the kiss, and I pressed against him, wanting closer, wanting more. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against mine again. Mine, he whispered, and it wasn't a question. Yours, I confirmed, and felt something settle in my chest at the admission. The door to the bar opened, shattering the moment. Dante pulled back smoothly, his professional mask sliding into place, but his hand remained at my waist, claiming and protective. One of his associates entered, a man I recognized as Anthony, who handled security for several of Dante's establishments. He took in the scene with one glance and wisely kept his expression neutral. Boss, we have a situation at the warehouse. Marcus is making noise about legal action, and he's hired some lawyer from downtown to back him up. Dante's expression went cold. Marcus can hire all the lawyers he wants. I have documentation of every illegal fight, every skimmed dollar, and every under-the-table payment he's made in the last 5 years. If he wants to make this legal, we'll make it legal. He turned to me, his hand cupping my face. I need to handle this. Stay here, finish your shift, and don't leave this building without security. Understood? Understood. I caught his hand before he could pull away. Be careful. Something softened in his expression. Always. I have something to come back to now. He left with Anthony, and I spent the rest of my shift replaying that kiss, that admission, the way he'd looked at me like I was the most important thing in his world. That night, lying in bed in the apartment above the bar, I heard my phone buzz. A text from Dante. Can't sleep. Thinking about you. I stared at the message for a long moment before responding. Same. His reply was immediate. Come downstairs. I want to show you something. I pulled on sweatpants and a tank top, padding barefoot down the private staircase that connected the apartment to Dante's office. The bar was closed, lights dimmed, and I found him waiting in the main room with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. I thought you had warehouse business to handle, I said, accepting the glass he offered. Handled. Marcus's lawyer took one look at the documentation I provided and advised him to drop any legal action immediately. Dante guided me to one of the leather booths, sliding in beside me. Which means we need to talk about next steps. Next steps? Marcus is cornered. His operation is dying, his fighters are leaving for other gyms, and his reputation is destroyed. Cornered animals are the most dangerous, sailor. He's going to do something desperate, and I need to know you're protected. I have security. I have the apartment. I have you. I sipped the wine, letting the smooth red warm my throat. What more protection do I need? Dante's hand settled on my thigh, warm through my sweatpants. I want you to stop working the bar during the day, stay in the apartment, train with me at night, and let me handle the public-facing aspects of the business until Marcus is completely neutralized. You want me to hide, I said flatly. I want you safe. His hand tightened on my leg. There's a difference. I set down my wine glass and turned to face him fully. I spent 3 years fighting men twice my size in underground rings. I survived Marcus's ambush and got away with cracked ribs and a black eye. I'm not fragile, Dante, and I'm not going to hide in your apartment like some damsel waiting to be rescued. I never said you were fragile. His other hand came up to cup my face. But you're mine to protect, and I take that responsibility seriously. If something happened to you because I let you work unprotected, nothing's going to happen to me, I interrupted. You've made it very clear to everyone in Chicago that I'm under your protection. Marcus would have to be suicidal to try anything now. That's exactly what worries me. Marcus has nothing left to lose. I studied his face in the dim bar lighting, seeing the genuine fear beneath his controlled exterior. This isn't just about protection, is it? This is about control. You need to know where I am, what I'm doing, that I'm safe every moment of every day. Yes, Dante admitted, his thumb tracing my cheekbone. I need that. Is it irrational? Probably. Is it excessive? Definitely. But I can't turn it off, sailor. You're in my head constantly. And the thought of you being hurt again? His voice roughened. I can't let that happen. I leaned into his touch, feeling the weight of his need for control and understanding it for what it was. Not dominance, but desperation. What if we compromise? I keep working the bar during afternoon shifts when you're here. At night, I stay in the apartment or train with you. I check in regularly. I don't go anywhere alone, and I let your security team shadow me. Dante's eyes searched mine. You'd do that? Give up that much freedom? It's not giving up freedom. It's accepting that someone actually cares whether I live or die. I caught his hand, pressing it against my cheek. Besides, you're not the only one who's scared. Marcus has nothing left to lose, and I know how dangerous that makes him. I don't want to be stupid about my safety. You could never be stupid, Dante murmured. And then he was kissing me again, softer this time, but no less intense. His hands moved to my waist, lifting me effortlessly until I was straddling his lap in the booth, and I wrapped my arms around his neck, losing myself in the taste and feel of him. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante's eyes were dark with desire and something deeper. Stay with me tonight. Not in the apartment. Here. With me. I knew what he was asking, what it meant to cross that line. Dante. Just to sleep, he clarified, though his hands on my waist told a different story. I want to hold you. I want to wake up knowing you're safe. That's all. Unless you want more. I should have said no. Should have maintained some boundary between us. But the truth was, I wanted this as much as he did. Wanted to sleep in his arms, wanted to wake up next to him, wanted to stop fighting the connection that had been building since the moment I'd broken his window. Okay, I whispered, just to sleep. Dante's smile was slow and devastating as he stood, lifting me with him. Liar, he murmured against my lips. But I'll take what I can get. He carried me up the private staircase to his apartment, one I'd never seen, larger and more luxurious than mine, and laid me on his massive bed with surprising gentleness. Then he stripped down to his boxer briefs and climbed in beside me, pulling me against his chest. "This is just sleeping," I protested weakly, very aware of the heat of his skin against mine. "Absolutely," Dante agreed, his hand sliding under my tank top to rest on my bare waist. "Just sleeping, with my hand on your skin, in my bed, where you belong." I laughed despite myself, curling into him, feeling safer and more content than I had in years. "You're impossible." "I'm yours," he corrected, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. "Get some rest, sailor. Tomorrow, we finish what Marcus started." I fell asleep in Dante Ravencroft's arms, listening to his heartbeat and feeling, for the first time since my mother's diagnosis, like maybe everything was going to be okay. I woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and Dante's arm heavy across my waist. At some point during the night, I'd turned toward him, my face pressed against his bare chest, one leg hooked over his. He was still asleep, his usually sharp features relaxed, dark hair falling over his forehead in a way that made him look younger, less dangerous. I took the opportunity to study him properly. The strong line of his jaw, the scar above his eyebrow that I'd noticed before, the intricate tattoos that covered his arms and chest. Up close, I could see the Italian words more clearly. La familia è tutto. Family is everything. "You're staring," Dante murmured, his voice rough with sleep, eyes still closed. "You're worth staring at," I admitted, then immediately felt heat flood my face. His eyes opened, dark and warm, and his hand tightened on my waist. "Stay just like this. Let me have this moment before the day starts and everything gets complicated again." So I stayed, letting him hold me, feeling his heartbeat under my palm and trying not to think about how right this felt, how easy it would be to fall completely for this man who'd shown me more care in 3 weeks than I'd experienced in years. "My mother wants to meet you," I said quietly. "She called yesterday. I told her I'd moved, and she wants to see the new place. See you." Dante's hand moved to cup the back of my head, fingers tangling in my hair. "What did you tell her about me?" "That you're my boss, that you helped me when I needed it, that you're—" I trailed off, unsure how to categorize what Dante was to me. "That I'm yours," he finished softly. "Tell her the truth, sailor. Tell her you're with the most dangerous man in Chicago, and he'd burn the city down before he let anyone hurt you again. That might scare her." "Good. She should be scared for you. This world I'm bringing you into isn't safe. It's violent and ruthless and unforgiving. But I promise you this. As long as you're mine, you'll never face it alone." His phone buzzed on the nightstand, shattering the moment. Dante grabbed it, his expression darkening as he read the screen. "What is it?" I asked, sitting up. Marcus made his move. 3 of my establishments were vandalized last night. Windows broken, inventory destroyed, threatening messages left. Dante was already moving, pulling on clothes with efficient speed. "He's trying to force me into a confrontation. What are you going to do?" Dante turned to look at me, and the man who'd held me so gently moments ago was gone. In his place was the mafia boss Chicago feared, cold and calculating and absolutely lethal. "I'm going to give him exactly what he wants, a confrontation. But on my terms, in my territory, with my rules." He crossed back to the bed, cupping my face in both hands. "You're staying here today. Security outside the door, no exceptions. This ends tonight, sailor. One way or another." "Let me come with you," I said, grabbing his wrists. "I can help. I know Marcus's tactics, his patterns." "No." The word was absolute. "You're not going anywhere near him. I won't risk you. Not for this. This started because of me, because I stole from him, because I needed that money for my mother's treatment. I should be there when it ends." Dante's jaw tightened. "This stopped being about you the moment Marcus decided to hunt you like an animal through my streets. This is between him and me now, about respect, about territory, about understanding what happens when you touch what's mine. You don't need to be there for that. He kissed me, hard and possessive and final, then pulled away. Stay here. I mean it, sailor. Don't leave this apartment. He was gone before I could argue further, the door closing behind him with terrible finality. I spent the morning pacing the apartment, training in the private gym, trying to burn off the anxious energy coursing through me. Dante had left 2 security guards outside my door, silent, professional men who probably had guns under their tailored suits. Around noon, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Sailor Thorne? A woman's voice, professional, unfamiliar. This is Dr. Chen from Northwestern Memorial. I'm calling about your mother. My heart stopped. What's wrong? Is she okay? She's stable, but she's asking for you. There's been a complication with her treatment, and she's quite agitated. She specifically requested that you come to the hospital. I'll be there in 20 minutes, I said, already grabbing my jacket. I made it past Dante's security by lying, told them I was just going down to the bar, needed to check on something. Then I slipped out the back exit and caught a cab to Northwestern Memorial. The hospital was familiar territory. I'd spent months here during my mother's treatment, knew the halls and waiting rooms like my own apartment. I found her room on the oncology floor, pushed open the door, and walked directly into Marcus's trap. He was there, along with 2 of his associates, and my mother wasn't. The room was empty except for them, and I realized with terrible clarity that there had never been a call from Dr. Chen. Thought you were smarter than this, Marcus said, moving to block the door. But everyone has a weakness. Yours is your mother. I backed up, my mind racing through defensive options. The room was small, 2 against 1, and my ribs were still healing. I couldn't fight my way out of this. Dante will kill you, I said, trying to sound confident despite the fear coursing through me. You know that, right? The moment he finds out you touched me, you're dead. Maybe. But first, I'm going to make you pay for destroying my operation. Then I'm going to use you as leverage to make Ravencroft back off. He wants you? Fine. He can have you, after I'm done. Marcus moved toward me, and I did the only thing I could think of. I triggered the panic button on my watch. The one Dante had given me my first day in the apartment. The one that connected directly to his phone and his security team. Then I fought. My first punch caught Marcus in the throat, buying me seconds. His associate came at me from the left, and I used his momentum against him, throwing him into the hospital equipment. But the second associate was bigger, faster, and he caught me around the waist, lifting me off my feet. Pain exploded through my still healing ribs as he slammed me against the wall. I drove my elbow back into his face, felt cartilage crunch, but his grip didn't loosen. Marcus was getting up, fury written across his features, and I knew with terrible certainty that I was out of options. The door exploded inward. Dante came through like a force of nature, followed by 4 of his security team. His eyes found me immediately, took in the situation in an instant, and the look on his face was the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen. Let her go. Each word was punctuated with barely restrained violence. The associate holding me hesitated, and that moment of uncertainty was all Dante needed. He moved with lethal speed, ripping me from the man's grasp and positioning me behind him in one fluid motion. Then he drove his fist into the associate's face with enough force to send him crashing through the hospital room's observation window. What followed was brutal and efficient. Dante's security team subdued Marcus's other associate, while Dante himself focused on Marcus. He didn't use a weapon, didn't need to. His fists delivered punishment with surgical precision, each hit calculated to cause maximum pain without killing. You, Dante said between hits, put your hands, another devastating punch, on what's mine. He was going to kill him. I could see it in the cold fury of his movements, the way he showed no mercy. Marcus was barely conscious, blood streaming from his mouth and nose, and Dante showed no signs of stopping. "Dante!" I grabbed his arm, pulling him back. "Stop. He's not worth it." Dante turned to look at me, and for a heart-stopping moment, I wasn't sure he even recognized me. Then his eyes focused, really seeing me, and the killing rage drained from his expression. "Did he hurt you?" His hands were on me instantly, checking for injuries, his touch gentle despite the violence he'd just inflicted. "Sailor, did he touch you?" "I'm okay. My ribs hurt, but I'm okay." I cupped his face, forcing him to look at me instead of Marcus's broken form on the floor. "I'm okay because you came. Because you saved me." Dante pulled me against his chest, his arms wrapping around me with desperate intensity. "You promised you'd stay in the apartment. You promised." He called me, pretended to be a doctor, said my mother needed me. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Don't apologize for loving your mother." Dante's lips pressed against the top of my head. "But God, Sailor, when I got your panic signal, when I realized where you were..." His arms tightened. "I've never been that scared in my life." "Boss." One of his security team stepped forward. "Police are on the way. We need to clear out." Dante nodded, but didn't release me. "Anthony, take Marcus and his associates to the warehouse. Make sure they understand what happens to people who touch my woman. Then make sure they leave Chicago, tonight. I don't care where they go, as long as it's far away from here." "What about the hospitals?" I asked quietly. "Marcus needs medical attention. He'll get it, after he signs papers turning over every property, every asset, and every connection he has to me. Then he gets patched up and put on a bus out of state." Dante's voice was cold, final. He's lucky I'm letting him live. We left the hospital through a back exit, avoiding the arriving police. In Dante's car, I finally started shaking, adrenaline crash hitting me hard. Dante pulled me against his side, one arm around my shoulders, holding me together as I fell apart. "I could have gotten you killed," I whispered. "If you'd arrived even a minute later. But I didn't. You held him off, bought yourself time, and trusted me to come for you. That's all that matters." Back at the apartment, Dante wouldn't let me out of his sight. He checked my ribs personally, rewrapped them, gave me painkillers, and then just held me on the couch while I processed everything that had happened. "It's over," he murmured into my hair. "Marcus is gone. His operation is mine. The underground fighting circuits all know you're protected. You're safe now, Sailor. You can stop running." "What if I don't know how to stop?" I asked quietly. "What if I've been fighting and running for so long that I don't know how to just be safe?" Dante pulled back to look at me, his hands framing my face. "Then I'll teach you. Every day I'll show you what it means to be protected, to be cherished, to be mine. And eventually you'll believe it." "I'm falling for you," I admitted, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "I know it's fast and probably crazy, but I'm falling for you, Dante, and that terrifies me." His smile was slow and devastating. "Good. Because I fell for you the moment you broke my window, bleeding and defiant and so beautiful it made my chest ache. I've just been waiting for you to catch up." He kissed me then, soft and sweet and perfect, and I kissed him back, pouring 3 weeks of fear and hope and desperate longing into the connection between us. "I love you," Dante whispered against my lips. "I know it's too soon and probably too intense, but I love you. Sailor Thorne, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt that." I should have been scared by the declaration, should have pulled back, but instead, I leaned into him, letting him hold me, and whispered back, "I love you too." That night, we didn't just sleep together. We made love slowly and carefully, Dante mindful of my healing ribs, his hands reverent on my skin. And afterward, lying in his arms, I finally understood what Lucia had meant. Dante Ravencroft didn't do casual. He didn't do temporary. When he loved completely, obsessively, forever. And I was ready for that. Ready for all of it. 6 months later, I stood in what used to be Sal's gym in Pilsen, watching contractors transform the space into something new. Dante stood beside me, his hand at the small of my back, warm and familiar and right. "You're sure about this?" he asked for the 3rd time that morning. "I'm sure." I leaned into him, looking at the blueprints spread across a makeshift table. Diamond Women's Boxing Academy, a place where women can train properly, learn self-defense, and never have to worry about being exploited by men like Marcus. Dante's arm came around my waist, and I felt his satisfaction in the gesture. After Marcus had left Chicago, under duress and with signed documents transferring all his assets to Dante, we'd spent months consolidating his operations. Most of the underground fighting rings had been shut down or legitimized. The gyms had been sold or converted. And this space, where I'd spent 3 years fighting for survival, was being transformed into something that actually helped women. "Your mother would be proud," Dante murmured, and I smiled. My mother had met Dante a week after the hospital incident. She'd been terrified at first. He was exactly the kind of man mothers warn their daughters about. But then she'd seen how he looked at me, how gentle he was despite his dangerous reputation, and she'd understood. "He's keeping you safe," she'd said later, holding my hand. "That's all that matters to me." Now her cancer was in full remission, her medical bills completely covered by Dante's insurance connections, which I knew meant he'd just paid them himself. She'd moved into a better apartment, also courtesy of Dante, and spent her days volunteering at the same hospital where she'd been treated. "Have you decided on instructors?" Dante asked, studying the blueprints. "I want to teach the beginner classes myself. Then I'm recruiting some of the women I fought with over the years, the ones who got out of the underground circuit and went legitimate. They deserve a chance to give back, teach the next generation how to protect themselves properly." "And the building security?" I rolled my eyes. "Is excessive, as always. But yes, I've approved your security measures. Guards during evening classes, cameras in all common areas, panic buttons in every room. You'll know I'm safe every moment I'm here." Dante turned me to face him, his hands settling on my hips. In the 6 months since Marcus had left Chicago, we'd found our rhythm. I worked at his bar in the mornings, trained women privately in the afternoons, and spent my evenings with him. We'd moved into his apartment permanently, though he'd kept mine available as a separate workspace where I handled the academy's administrative tasks. "I can't help it," he said, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "Keeping you safe is hardwired into me now. Besides, you promised me something, remember?" My hand moved to my stomach, still flat but not for much longer. "I remember." We'd found out 2 weeks ago. I was pregnant, 12 weeks along, though we hadn't told anyone yet. The news had sent Dante into a new level of protectiveness that would have been suffocating if it wasn't so obviously rooted in love. "Twins?" he murmured, his hand covering mine on my stomach. "2 babies. My doctor says it's common in families with your genetic background. Your doctor also says I'm perfectly healthy and can continue my normal activities with some modifications." I stood on tiptoe to kiss him. "Which means you can stop trying to wrap me in bubble wrap. I make no promises." But he kissed me back, soft and sweet, and I felt his smile against my lips. "You're carrying my children, Sailor. I'm allowed to be protective." "You're always protective." "True, but now I have excellent justification." Lucia appeared in the doorway, carrying coffee and looking every inch the successful businesswoman she was. Are you two done being disgustingly cute? We have contract negotiations in 20 minutes. We're never done being disgustingly cute, Dante replied. But he released me and moved to the table where Lucia was spreading out more documents. I watched them work, brother and sister, discussing business with the same sharp intelligence, and marveled at how my life had changed. 6 months ago, I'd been bleeding and desperate, breaking windows in the middle of the night. Now I was planning to open my own academy, pregnant with twins, and in love with a man who'd turned his entire world upside down to keep me safe. Sailor? Lucia called. I need your signature on the insurance documents. I joined them at the table, reading through the papers before signing. The academy was insured for everything imaginable: fire, theft, injury, natural disasters. Dante had made sure of it. Have you thought about names? Lucia asked casually, though her eyes were sharp with curiosity. I glanced at Dante, who shrugged. We were going to wait to tell people. Please. I've seen how my brother looks at you. I knew you were pregnant before you did. Lucia smiled. Besides, I want to be the favorite aunt. That means getting involved early. If they're boys, I was thinking about Italian names, I said, to honor Dante's heritage. If they're girls, I want to name them after strong women I've known. And if it's one of each? Dante asked. Then we compromise, like we do with everything. I leaned into him, feeling his warmth and strength and the absolute certainty that he'd protect our growing family with the same intensity he'd protected me. The contractors returned from lunch, and we spent the afternoon making final decisions about the academy. By evening, my feet hurt and my back ached, and Dante noticed immediately. Home, he commanded. Feet up, dinner delivered, and early to bed. I'm pregnant, not fragile, I protested, but let him guide me to his car anyway. You're both, he corrected, opening the passenger door with the care of a man handling something precious. And I love you for it. That night, curled up in bed with Dante's hand resting on my stomach, I thought about everything that had led to this moment. The desperate theft that had started it all. The violence that had brought me to his door. The fear and trust and gradual understanding that safety could come from the most unexpected source. What are you thinking? Dante asked, his thumb tracing circles on my skin. That I broke your window and found home, I said softly. That the man everyone fears is the gentlest person I know. That you turned my worst night into the beginning of everything good in my life. Dante shifted, propping himself up on one elbow to look down at me. In the low light from the city outside, his dark eyes were warm and infinite. I told you the first night, you're mine, sailor. That hasn't changed. If anything, it's gotten stronger with every day we've been together. I know. I feel it too. I gestured between us. This wasn't what I expected, but it's what I needed. You're what I needed. He kissed me then, slow and deep and perfect, his hand still protective on my stomach where our children grew. I love you, he whispered against my lips. I love our babies. I love the life we're building together. And I promise you, Sailor Thorne, I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret breaking my window that night. I could never regret it. You saved me, Dante. In every way a person can be saved. We saved each other, he corrected, pulling me closer. You needed protection, and I needed someone worth protecting. Someone who saw past the reputation and the danger to the man underneath. Someone brave enough to break my window and strong enough to steal my heart. I fell asleep in his arms, feeling safer and more loved than I'd ever imagined possible. And in the morning, when I woke to find Dante already awake, watching me with that intense focus I'd come to know meant he was thinking about our future, I understood something fundamental. Love wasn't supposed to be easy. It wasn't supposed to be simple or safe or predictable. Sometimes love came at 3 a.m, bleeding and desperate and breaking through windows. Sometimes it wore expensive suits and carried guns and commanded empires. Sometimes it demanded everything: trust and vulnerability, and the courage to stop running. And sometimes, when you were brave enough to accept it, love transformed everything. Turned gyms into academies, danger into safety, fear into home. 8 months later, I stood in that same academy, 7 months pregnant with twins that kicked constantly, teaching a class of 20 women basic self-defense. Dante watched from the back of the room, having long ago given up on the pretense that he wasn't going to hover for the entire pregnancy. After class, he approached with water and a protein bar. "You need to eat. The babies need nutrition." "The babies need their father to relax," I countered, but took the offered snacks anyway. "We're fine, Dante. I'm fine. The doctors say I'm the healthiest pregnant patient they've seen in months. That's because I make sure you rest, eat properly, and don't overdo it." He guided me to a chair, kneeling in front of me to help remove my training shoes. "Your feet are swollen." "My feet are always swollen. I'm 31 weeks pregnant with twins. Everything is swollen." But I let him massage my feet anyway, because despite the excessive protectiveness, Dante's care was genuine and tender, and exactly what I needed. "1 month until the academy's official opening," he said, working on my left foot. "Are you sure you want to be here for that? The babies could come early. The academy opens on schedule, with or without me in attendance. But I plan to be there. This is my dream, Dante. Our dream. I'm not missing it because of swollen feet and backaches." He looked up at me, and the love in his eyes made my breath catch. "You're amazing. You know that? Most women would be at home, resting, preparing for the birth. But you're here, teaching women to protect themselves, building something that matters." "I learned from the best," I said softly, cupping his face. "You showed me that trauma can be transformed into purpose, that violence can be answered with protection, that the worst nights can become the foundation for the best life." Dante stood, pulling me up with him and into his arms. My pregnant belly pressed against him, our babies kicking between us, and I felt his smile against my hair. "I love you," he whispered. "I love our family. I love the life we've built from broken windows and late-night rescues. And I promise you, sailor, our children will grow up knowing that their mother is the strongest, bravest, most beautiful woman I've ever known. And their father," I added, "is the man who looked at a bleeding stranger and saw someone worth saving, worth keeping, worth loving forever." We stood there in the empty academy, holding each other, 2 people who'd found home in the most unexpected way. And when our twins were born 3 weeks later, a boy and a girl, healthy and perfect and loved beyond measure, we named them Hope and Justice. Because that's what we'd built together. Hope for a better future, and justice for all the women who'd suffered like I had. And it all started with a broken window, a dangerous man, and the simple question, who hurt your face? The answer, I'd learned, didn't matter nearly as much as what came after. The protection, the love, the transformation of violence into something beautiful. Dante Ravencroft had asked who hurt my face. And then he'd spent the rest of his life making sure no one ever hurt me again. That was the real story. Not the breaking, but the healing. Not the danger, but the safety. Not the fear, but the love that conquered it. And I wouldn't change a single moment.